For this session, we will be discussing labor-only contracting. The rules concerning contracting arrangement in the Philippines could be found in Article 106 to 109 of the Labor Code and the appropriate issuance of the Department of Labor and Employment, particularly in the Department Order and Department Circular. But for this particular session, we will be focusing on labor-only contracting. Contracting arrangement is still considered a valid management prerogative. That is, the employer or the principal can still contract out work to a agency or contractor so that that agency or contractor can perform the service using its own workers. But because this kind of arrangement may be exploited or abused, the Labor Code provides for certain requirements or rules to protect the workers. The labor-only contracting is considered to be an illegal, unlawful, or an invalid type of arrangement. The definition of labor-only contracting could be found in the Department Order, particularly in Section 5 of DO 174. In DO 174, in that section, you will notice that there are two types of labor-only contracting. The first type of labor-only contracting, which is again unlawful or illegal, is that when the contractor has no substantial capital or equipment to perform the service and the workers that are supplied are performing work that are directly related to the business of the principal or employer. The cases already provided that the contractor need not have both substantial capitalization or equipment to perform the service. So for example, in the case of Neri or in San Miguel Foods, the Supreme Court has already clarified that as long as the contractor has either substantial capitalization or equipment to perform the service, that would be enough to take it out of the context of labor-only contracting. In the Department Order, substantial capitalization is defined as 5 million pesos paid up capital for corporations and 5 million pesos for single proprietorship. But in terms of equipment, the Department Order did not define the amount. So in other words, even if the equipment used by the contractor to perform the service falls below 5 million pesos, as long as it can provide the service properly, that would still be considered as compliance with the requirement. Another issue that the Supreme Court has looked into would be whether the concurrence of lack of capitalization or equipment and the fact that the workers are performing work that are directly related must be present. In the case of Aliviado, the Supreme Court said that those two elements must be present for a contractor to be considered labor-only contractor. In other words, it is not enough that the workers are performing work that are directly related. There must also be a finding that the contractor does not have substantial capitalization or equipment to perform the function. If those two elements are present, then that is a situation wherein, as provided for in Aliviado, the contractor will be considered engaged in illegal or unlawful or invalid contracting arrangement, which is called labor-only contracting. However, as the years go by, the Supreme Court in two Coca-Cola cases appear to have changed the rule. In the case of Lingat, the Supreme Court held that the concurrence of the two elements need not be present. In that particular case, even when the contractor has substantial capitalization because of the finding that the workers are performing work that are directly related to the business of the principal, the Supreme Court still found that the contractor is engaged in labor-only contracting. This ruling was affirmed in another Coca-Cola case. But in the recent ruling, it would appear that the doctrine has reverted back to the Aliviado doctrine. So for example, in the Pizza Hut case, while the workers there are performing work that are essential to the business of principal, upon finding that the contractor has substantial capitalization, the Supreme Court found that the arrangement is still legitimate. So what we can see in the case decided by the Supreme Court, there appears to be a flip-flopping of decision, but the most recent of which we can see that the doctrine provided for in Labiado still stand. Note that if there is a finding of labor-only contracting, the result will be the workers are considered employees of the principal because the contractor will only be considered as an agent of that principal. As mentioned, there are two types of labor-only contracting under Section 5 of DO 174. The second type is if the principal is the one controlling the means and method of work of the workers. We mentioned during the discussion of employment relationship, the most important test in the fourfold test is the power to control not only the end result, but also the means and method upon which the individual performs the work. So when you look at labor-only contracting arrangement rules, the second type of labor-only contracting is that if when the principal controls the work, then by virtue of the fourfold test, the power of control, it could be considered that the principal is the real employer of the workers, and the contractor, who is supposed to be the employer, would only be considered as an agent of the principal. So again, there are two types of labor-only contracting under the rules. The first type is that if the contractor is found to have no substantial capitalization or equipment, and the workers are performing work that are directly related to the business of the principal, or it is the principal which controls the means and method of the workers. There are related topics on the matter which also result in the finding that the principal is the employer of the contractors. One of which would be in Section 6 of DO 174. You will notice in your notes that there are a list of illicit arrangements where even if it's outside the ambit of Section 5, if the principal and the contractor performs any of those illicit arrangements, the result will be the same. The workers will be considered as the employees of the principal, and you'll find that rule in Section 7 of DO 174. In Section 10, you will see that if the workers are not afforded by their rights, the result will also be the same. The principal will be considered as the employer of the workers. In Section 11 of DO 174, if the parties fail to execute a written employment contract and written service agreement by virtue of Section 12, the principal will also be considered as the employer of the workers. In other words, in DO 174, there are 4 instances wherein it is the principal that will be considered as the real employer of the workers. Number 1, if there is a labor-only contracting arrangement. Number 2, if there is a commission of illicit arrangement. And number 3, if the rights of the workers are not given to them. And number 4, if the employment contract or the service agreement have not been executed. In summary, there may be instances wherein contracting arrangement may be considered labor-only contracting when the contractor does not have substantial capitalization and the workers are performing work that are directly related to the business of the principal, or it is the principal that controls the work of the workers of the contractor. In the next episode, we will be discussing the right to self-organization for the purposes of collective bargaining.